everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jiaxin from Tiger Brokers, and this is my colleague Raphael. So today we'll be discussing on some of the current behaviors of investors and trends that investors should be aware of in the current market and moving forward in the future. So Raphael, can you share with us some of your observations in the current market?
All right, thank you, Jiaxin. Okay, so basically for this US market that we're looking at currently, so for retail sales wise, we saw an unexpected rise in September as consumer keeps up with the spending. So basically, the estimates, Dow Jones estimates for this US market was actually for a decline of 0.2% in the retail spending. But in fact, the results I have shown was that US retail spending for the month had increased by 0.7%. So what does this actually mean for the broader market is that it is a sign that investors or rather consumers are willing to spend more in this current market situation, and this is one of the key economic factors when it comes down to looking at how economies grow and grow going forward. And on top of that, sales retail spending sales were up 13.9% compared to the previous years. So we can see that actually since the COVID-19 pandemic, right, this form of recovery is relatively strong. And going forward, as we in this session, we will be uncovering some of these key figures for investors to look out for. Alright, the next thing that I would want to highlight to key investors is also to look out for is the jobless claims number. So for the month of October, right, jobless claims in fact fell below 300,000 mark. This is the first time since the pandemic began. So this actually means that employment rates are going up, and we can see that the economy is actually moving forward. We see a more robust labor market going forward, and this will ultimately help to boost economic activities, and we are actually expecting better figures going forward. And this is I would say ever since the pandemic have occurred and impacted most of our lives, and going forward we will expect more positive kind of figures going forward. Alright, so after keeping a lookout for both the retail spending and the unemployment rate figures, the next thing to look out for is also the earnings of these companies. Right, so for the third quarter of 2021, right, companies have reported strong earnings across the board. It's not just a few other companies, but mainly across the board. Just allow me to share with you. First off, we have is Tesla posting its record revenue and profits in the third quarter. Basically, they also shown strong and robust when it comes down to record deliveries figures in year 2021. And it's not just the automobile sector. We've seen such figures going across the board, such as companies such as Goldman Sachs in the finance industry, which has also reported earnings beating estimates as of Q3 2021. Just a quick update to you guys. It's not just the US segment that we are looking at. Whereas for the Singapore segment, earlier on DBS also had issued their third quarter results earlier today, and it has also increased its revenue, or rather profit margin, by 30.1% compared to the previous year. So what we can see is that across markets, it's not just the US, across globally, companies from various sectors are actually coming in strong when it comes to earning seasons.
Thank you, Raphael, for sharing. I think from your sharing, I have captured three main messages. The first one being the consumer spending is increasing, and then there's a decrease in unemployment rate after the pandemic, and also companies' revenues are rising. And for the previous quarter, which is third quarter of 2021, so it seems that the market is quite optimistic, and we are experiencing growth moving forward. So can you share with us more on where and what are the trends that investors or potential investors can take a look at?
Alright, so from this case, right, from what we can see, that COVID-19 has disrupted most of the businesses across all segments of the field. But what we saw that in the trend was that actually there are more companies taking up this improvement or advancement in their technologies. So first off, we have is studies shown by the Global Artificial Intelligence Adoption Index, which is commissioned by IBM themselves. So basically, this survey ran across a span of companies, 500 companies being small to large firms in Singapore. And of these 500 technology decision makers, 43% of these respondents have indicated that they are actually implementing or speeding up their adoption towards artificial intelligence. And on top of that, this is consistent with the responses received by countries such as the United States, UK, China, France, Germany, and India. So with the adoption of artificial intelligence, this aims to help companies to be more productive, firstly. Secondly, in terms of data and security, to enhance their data and security. And last but not least is that we've seen supply chain being disrupted by this kind of market scenario. We also see some chokeholds in the supply chain recently due to some of this fleet of ships being stuck in the river. So when these kind of things happen, with the help of AI technologies, it will help businesses to plan their supply and demand better going forward, and this will allow these companies to better gauge and to with data processing helps them to ultimately increase their sales going forward in the future.
Thank you, Raphael. I think AI definitely will play a very important part in our lives. And, I've recently read an article which talks about the development in AI in the next 30 years. What the article talk about is that, as humans, our IQ remains about 100 plus, average 100 plus, but then for AI, their IQ actually will increase exponentially, and in 30 years time, the IQ of AI can reach like 10,000, which is very, very high. So we see that actually in this industry there is a lot of growth, and AI will definitely help companies to improve their efficiency, services, and client experiences. So how does actually the implementation or the adoption of AI actually help the companies? Can you get into more details?
All right, so allow me to elaborate. So these days, when you purchase something online, I will expect everyone to be able to see that actually there's actually a chat box where you can find your questions or find someone to answer your questions to. So with AI, strengthening of these AI capabilities will allow businesses to direct this channel these kind of specific questions to the specific channel within that segment in order for them to get the most accurate answer that they want. I believe that many of us here may have experienced I would say unfavorable response from the AI that we are currently using at this current juncture. But moving on, going forward with a stronger implementation, or rather this improvement in this technology wise, likelihood we will be able to get more favorable response when it comes down to AI capabilities. And also going forward, it will help to address to the needs of the consumer who is actually using that chat box at that point of time to answer their question in a more appropriate and a more productive manner. And ultimately, the main aim of using this is to, first off, is to cut down operational costs for businesses. Secondly, is to allow users to get their answers as and when they require. So the main focus of this should be whereby it improves the customer experience and not rather allow the customers to feel unhappy or unhappiness or the dissatisfaction towards using this AI technology. If a customer were to use this AI technology and subsequently find out that they would rather speak to a human being instead, then that would have proven that particular technology may have to improve going forward to get the answer that he or she, the user, wants. Another key trend that I believe investors should keep a lookout for is that what we're experiencing right now in this current juncture is what we call the millennial effect. So what is a millennial effect? All right, so based on this Straits Times article, right, millennial basically refers to the population who are born in the year of 1980 to all the way to 2000. So basically, currently, as of 2021, the weightage of millennial in this current in this millennial segment of the world's population is approximately 25%. And by year 2025, this group of millennials will encompass 75% of the global labor market. So what does this actually means to investors, right? You may ask. All right, so with our global labor market with a strength of 75% being millennials themselves, this also means that millennials are at their prime age of earnings and also prime age of spending. And these earnings and spending habits will eventually shape how world economy moves going forward in the future. So some of the key trends that we are looking at currently would be 5G communications, such as I've shared earlier on, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and going forward will be genetic engineering, quantum computing. And the other trend that we are looking at currently in this millennial segment is that actually we do experience what we have never seen before, what we call the sharing economy. Car sharing, you have consumer home sharing, you have online content sharing, music streaming. This kind of sharing economy have not been in the past, and going forward in the future, these are some of the key things that we may want to keep in mind, that millennials are more open to such an option going forward. So these are some of the key trends that we are looking at going forward. So just allow me to check with you these days, how do you guys get information?
I would say if it's information on investment related matters, I think in the past people love to read research papers, but I think for millennials, I mean I'm part of the millennials, and for millennials what we like to do is really to search out information on social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, or Telegram chat groups, and also through word of mouth, that is through our friends. So we love like short pieces of information rather than very long one. Like we feel after reading it, it makes us feel quite boring. Yeah. So these are some of the platforms that we abstract information from. So mainly social media platform and Internet of Things, I would say.
All right, so you're right to say that most of us going forward would be referring to, as you can see these days, a hot topic would be people reviewing their products on YouTube. We also seen that YouTubers actually making a lot of money just by doing reviews, be it products, be it travel, basically across all board. We are looking at this current juncture that information are being shared widely across through these sharing platforms. We also seen an upkeep of people streaming their daily lives on Twitch and tweeting, microblogging on their daily lives as well. So going forward, these are actually modes of information search that people actually refer to. But when it comes down to all this, we have to keep in mind that technology-wise, there has always been one key factor in place for all this, and which is why I'm going to highlight here today, of course, in this session, is to highlight the key importance of a semiconductor, because without this semiconductor-wise, all these initiatives would not have been possible, and all this key technology will not be possible. So the semiconductor industry is actually quite broad, and many of you might here be thinking about a semiconductor. Actually, everyone calls themselves semiconductor. So what is it actually? So allow me to just emphasis on this. Right, first off, the whole semiconductor market can actually be segregated into three segments. The first segment will be the pure play segment. Right, the pure play segment themselves, they are the big players whereby they do all the way from manufacturing, design, testing, and ultimately packaging. So these companies are such as Taiwan Semicon Manufacturing Company, SMIC. So these are the key two big players in the market when it comes down to pure play. And secondarily, we do have another segment. It's called IDM, or integrated device manufacturers themselves. So these companies, they design and manufacture their own chip but may not offer foundry services to other players in the market. So these companies such as Intel, Micron, Samsung themselves. So this group of companies, they do have their own technology and they have their own capability in manufacturing their own products, but they do not offer such services to the rest. And last but not least, we do have what we call the fabless suppliers. Alright, so basically these companies, they do not manufacture their own their own chips, but rather they design and offer their design services to third parties. And these companies are such as AMD, Nvidia, and Apple themselves. So I just want to highlight that according to this Semiconductor Industry Association, right? So for the year 2021, right, we saw an increase of 29.2% compared to year 2020. So from what we can see currently as of today in this current market, that everything needs semiconductor. We saw a semiconductor crunch, which is why it led to some of these companies stopping their car productions and all these news that we are hearing in the market. So I see that going forward, this may be a space that investors may want to keep a lookout for, as it will affect their daily lives and it is basically a daily essential.
Thank you, Raphael, for sharing. I mean, semiconductor has always been a hot topic since pandemic happened last year, and we have seen news that we run like a shortage of the chips during the COVID-19 period, and more attentions are putting into this industry. So would you mind sharing with us more on how the semiconductor market is performing currently?
Alright, so as we can see earlier on, I have shared with you on the increase in terms of the sales figures for semiconductor. The next up that I want to place emphasis is that the growth of semiconductors have been growing, and the expected outstanding growth would be for this year would be 25.1%. Alright, so next up I would like to share is that the market size data of this semicon market. As we can see from the chart, right? So basically across the years, as technology increases, we can see that the semicon market actually expands in terms of its market size worldwide. So with this in mind, I just want to highlight that going forward, actually there are a lot of space in the technology space that would require semiconductor. So allow me to touch on that. Okay, so I just want to update as well, as most of us are aware, Facebook have recently changed their name to Meta, which also means for short term for Metaverse. So this Metaverse, in fact, is actually what we call, I would say, a world of its own within the virtual segment. So with this in mind, going forward, there will likelihood be emphasis or growth in terms of the graphic chip space, where to host all these Metaverse capabilities of all these graphic memories. Perhaps this is why we also seen a sharp increase of Nvidia share price recently as well. So in this space, there will be greater emphasis on this virtual world that we're looking at. In the past, people have been talking about AI, have been talking about AR technology, augmented reality, virtual reality, but actually these are slowly coming into a real world kind of thing, whereby people will place strong emphasis on such virtual worlds or virtual realities that we are looking at in this current market. So with this in mind, which I feel that it is appropriate to share with investors that they should also keep a lookout for this segment of the market, that they actually do not lose out. Why do I say so? Because going forward, if we were to look at why companies are placing emphasis on all these graphic renderings and all, it ultimately boils down to the user, how it is being utilized, how this group of services are utilized. For Tesla itself, this group of graphic generating purposes meant to allow to assist them in terms of their driverless driving, their GPS map routing, and all this would be a key component, a key feature in their vehicles moving forward, and this would set as a benchmark tools for vehicles that are being manufactured going forward in the future. And all this wise in our daily life these days, just look around you, your handphones that you're using, the lights that your switch that you're touching on, all this will ultimately require a semiconductor in it. So which is why I feel that for investors, this is a market segment that is an essential part of this your portfolio that you should not lose out on.
Definitely, we have seen a big growth in the semiconductor industry for at least for the past 10 years. So moving forward, what do you think will be the semiconductor market outlook in 2022?
Right. So, for the market outlook for growth, right? So, based on a forecast by World Semiconductors Trade Statistic Wise, they have shown that they expect semiconductor market to continue to grow, and in this segment, is expected to grow around 10.1% by the global semiconductor sales. So, this is, I would say, as of right now, where we are looking at this semiconductor crunch, this current market juncture, actually there's room for growth for this segment as the supply chain slowly eases. We will see that companies will put in more dollars in investing in this segment as well.
Yeah, Raphael, so just now you mentioned a very interesting concept which is called the Metaverse. And many companies are actually tapping into this virtual space. So how will this impact us and impact the companies moving forward?
All right. So basically, let me elaborate further on this metaverse. Basically, metaverse would mean that a virtual world where people can interact with each other. So what we can see that in this space, right? Actually, what we have seen is Alibaba actually have participated in this metaverse space in this upcoming Singles Day. As well. So basically, it's an art exhibition where people can interact and own assets that are actually in this digital world. And these assets that are owned in the digital world, right, are generally encrypted and it is safe for users as well. So from this spectrum of things that we've seen going on, expanding into the virtual world, not just the user experience, but rather I would say that we have seen a trend in such expansion into the virtual world, such as virtual reality for gaming. We've seen some games or rather competitions are being held currently for all these virtual reality games where humans can participate and interact on this virtual world as well. Next up would be a virtual reality form of shopping for property. As we know that how COVID-19 pandemic has stopped us from traveling and all, but what didn't stop was the economy. No one wanted to stop. We will still continue to progress on, and consumers still wants to buy their property. So how can actually consumers buy all this property without the need to travel would be through virtual reality. So these days we also seen that actually virtual reality allows consumers to buy properties from across the world without actually being physically there, and it will allow this kind of transaction are unique, but it will continue to expand going forward in the future if should any of this pandemic were to happen going forward in the future. Next up would be that we also seen that since this pandemic, right, sales of a car as a vehicle were also all these companies also started to roll out in terms of their virtual reality for shopping experience for its clients as well. So in this segment of virtual reality, we can see that it's rather relatively exciting, and this is just the beginning, and it will continue to expand going forward, which is why we feel that going forward, investors or rather investors who are looking out for opportunities should also keep a lookout in this space as well.
Thank you, Raphael, for sharing. Definitely a very interesting concept. And yeah, so I think today Raphael has shared many interesting concepts. And firstly, he talked about the market update. And I think what we can learn from today's conversation is that moving forward and coupled with the millennial effect, the areas of AI, Internet of Things, IoT, and semiconductor industries, and the metaverse will play a critical and important role in the future developments of companies. Yeah, so investors can consider research and invest on the companies who place a great emphasis in synergy creation in these a few areas. And thank you everyone for attending the session, and we hope that you have gained some insights of the sharing, and we hope to see you again. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To find out more on the special promotions with Wealth Assembly exclusively for you, please scan the QR code now and grab your rewards valued more than 5,000 Singapore dollars.